Good morning, everyone. Today we are examining Jeremiah chapter 51. And it's the longest chapter in the book of Jeremiah, as we talked about yesterday. It's 64 verses. And there's a lot of things that we could discuss and a lot of things that we could spend our time on this morning. But I've decided I want to go in two different directions in our discussion this morning that in many ways take things just a little bit of a different route from the normal perspective or the normal things that we would pull out of this chapter. And the reason for that is that a lot of the things in this chapter are quite repetitive, especially from chapter 50, where a lot of these same principles and these same keys are involved in the relationship between God and Babylon. But I want to hone in on two important features of the things that are stated in chapter 51. The first one is the feature of prophecy. Obviously, Jeremiah is a book of prophecy, but I want you to notice the intricacies of the prophecy that is going to be laid out in Jeremiah 51. Twice in this chapter, the first time is in verse number 11, and the second time is in verse number 28. There you have God speaking specifically about the kingdom that is going to destroy the Babylonians. It is going to be the kingdom of the Medes. As a matter of fact, if you turn over to history, for one, but also to Daniel chapter 5, you will find that Darius the Mede is the one who is going to capture the city of Nineveh, and he is going to overthrow the Babylonian Empire in a single night as far as the main thrust of it. And it is going to come very quickly. And so you have the statement made by Jeremiah of the promise of the Medes being the ones who are going to overthrow the Babylonian Empire. However, when you come down to the end of the chapter in verses 60 and 61, you find out that these things are going to take place, or rather 59 and 60. These things are going to be written down by Jeremiah in the 4th year of King Zedekiah, which means they are going to be written more than 50 years before they actually take place. And so more than 50 years before the fall of Babylon, Jeremiah is going to write these things, and he's going to tell exactly who it is that is going to overthrow the Babylonian Empire. Somebody says, well, okay, big deal, because obviously the Medes were great enemies of the Babylonians, except that's not the case. As a matter of fact, if you'll recall back to our studies through Isaiah, you'll find that we discussed when it comes to the fall of Nineveh, that the Medes and the Persians were actually the allies of the Babylonians in those fights against the Assyrians. And so there is a long history with the Medes and Persians. But in this case, the time is going to come when the Medes are going to attack Babylon instead of being her ally. And so when it comes to this judgment against Babylon, we need to understand that the prophetic elements are all there. He doesn't just give some general statement as far as that goes. Twice in chapter 51, he tells exactly who it's going to be. And some 50 years later, yes, it will be taken place just exactly the way that Jeremiah says that it will. The second thing that I want us to notice comes out of the general sense of the chapter. And that is, as you read Jeremiah 50 and 51 and the statements made concerning Babylon, there are all of these different statements that are made concerning their idolatry, concerning giving back to them what they have done to others, and so on and so forth. And there will be those who will look at these chapters and they'll say, this really isn't God being fair, because God is the one who says he raised up Babylon to do these things and to be this way and to act this way, and now he says he's punishing them for being what he caused them to be. And yet that's not exactly the case. When you go back and you look at the tenor of the prophets, you have this dual-sided message of God using a nation that is already there, and God has already been doing these things and using them in such a way as to bring out his will. But on the other side of that, there is also the expectation of God for them to do what is right, and for them to react, and for them to interact in the right way. As you go through and you read the book of Daniel, one of the things that you find in the first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel is that God over and over again comes to the king of Babylon, and he comes before the Babylonians seeking to give them proof of who he is, and seeking to exert himself as authority above all other gods and above all other ideas that they have had up till this point. And the Babylonians will listen in some ways, but it won't be enough for them to change who they are and to change the focus of how they live their lives. And so the judgment comes. And so the judgment comes on Babylon not because they conquered Israel and Judah, but because they, like Israel and Judah, have not turned to the Lord. They have not accepted the Lord. They have not been willing to acquiesce to the Lord. And so you have the statements that are going to be made elsewhere in the prophets that while Babylon is going to be used to bring Israel and Judah under subjection, they are also going to receive their just reward for their actions and for their lives and the things and the choices that they have made. Not because they're being forced into it. God is going to give them many opportunities to make the changes that need to be made, to do the things that need to be done, but they're not going to follow through with it. So as you examine in chapter 51 all of these different statements that are going to be made about Jeremiah telling Babylon that they are receiving the reward for their actions, that they are receiving the response for what they have done. It truly is the case. They've not been placed into a corner where they had no choice but to do what God told them to do, and then he punished them for it. But rather, God used them for his purposes, but at the same time recognized that there was going to come a time where if they didn't change, they were going to face the same consequences. And that was one of the things he wanted them to learn in seeing Judah. So these are some of the things that I wanted to point out from Jeremiah chapter 51. Tomorrow, Lord willing, we will examine the final chapter of the book of Jeremiah and begin reading through Jeremiah chapter 52. But until then, I hope you have a good day.